Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. I want to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for all of your love and support and encouragement and kindness over these last 4 months. I recently completed my first Ironman triathlon on September 23rd, 2018 in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and I was training for 16 weeks leading up to that, and I have documented that here on YouTube and on Instagram, and you guys have been endlessly supportive. Such an outpouring of love and well wishes and kindness and gifts and cards and messages and videos. And I cannot thank you enough. You guys are absolutely incredible, and your support has meant the world to me. So thank you. I think this is going to be the last video I do kind of in this triathlon series. I'm just going to do a quick wrap up of my training and race day. So somebody asked me how many miles I trained over the course of these 4 months, and I thought that would be fun to add up. So last night I added it up. Over the course of 4 months, I swam about 38 miles. I biked over 1,000 miles, and I ran over 300 miles. So altogether, I completed a distance of 1,346 miles, which on a map is about the distance from New York to New Orleans if you take the long way, which I think is just absolutely incredible. I did also go back and look at my caloric burn over those months. So before training, my base metabolic rate was about 1,800 calories. During these 4 months, on my shorter training days, I was burning about 2,500 calories. On my longer training days, about 3,500 to 3,600 calories. And none of that includes the swim because my Fitbit's not waterproof, so I don't know how many calories I was burning while I was swimming. But I thought that was pretty interesting because I will show you in a moment, my weight didn't really change. So I think that's just a testament to like your body quickly adjusting to find a new normal. As far as my weight goes, when I first started training, I was 184.4, and just yesterday I was 182.9. So technically that's a loss of like a pound and a half, but as you see, I had quite a bit of fluctuation throughout these 4 months. I did see a low weight of 181 in July and a high weight of 190.1 in August. So about a 9-pound fluctuation. I was just up and down throughout those 4 months. So, I wasn't focusing at all on weight loss. I was trying very carefully to eat only when I was hungry. And as you guys remember, over these last 4 months, my eating has evolved a bit. I've stayed strictly ketogenic. However, in the first 4 weeks or so, I was super hungry, and I think that's because my body was adjusting to this new level of activity. And then in the rest of the training, I felt less famished after a workout. So I was trying to just fuel my body, as people say, but just eat accordingly, eat more if I was hungry and be okay with that. I stopped tracking my macros, which is crazy for me. I've always tracked my macros since I started trying to lose weight. But I was also very conscious to not overeat. I had this incentive or motivation to eat properly because I knew how directly it impacted the way I felt during my training. So it wasn't really hard for me to stay on track in terms of what I was eating, but in terms of quantity, that varied quite a bit from day to day just based on how I was feeling. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. Oh, also I was very religious about supplementing electrolytes. On many days I would take a Zip Fizz, but every single day with my multivitamin, I also take calcium, zinc, potassium, and magnesium. And on days if I felt a little bit of twitching in the muscles, I would supplement with these sport salts, which is just more sodium, calcium, magnesium, and potassium. So just an extra boost, but that was only sometimes. But every day I was taking the baseline vitamins. So I think if you're training in a ketogenic fashion for endurance training, supplementing electrolytes consistently is very important. Okay, so about race day, you guys, it was just the most wonderful experience. Even though the weather was terrible, the whole thing was just absolutely incredible. So my mom flew in on Friday. Saturday morning, we drove down to Atlantic City, which is about 2 hours south of where I live. And there was a big athlete village set up, and I had no idea how enormous this thing was really going to be. I mean, you think 3,000 people, but it's 3,000 cars, 3,000 bikes, rows and rows of endless bicycles. And there were almost all of them were those really fancy triathlon bikes. And here I was in my bike that is, to someone who's experienced, it's clearly old and it's clearly too small for me. I'd been training on it, and I'm so grateful for having had this bike lent to me. But I felt, you guys remember that scene in Cool Runnings where the like Jamaican bobsled team shows up with their like rinky dink bobsled that they like scrounge together, and they like show up and there's like all these Olympians with their like fancy bobsleds, and they've like literally never even seen snow before. I felt like that. The day we showed up, I was like, I am so out of my league. They had a very organized check-in process. I went through, I got my bib and my numbers and my tattoos and the band and all this. And then I checked in my bike. I just had to like drop it off and leave it in my designated spot. They also had a briefing, like an athlete briefing. And at some point they did say like, raise your hand if this is your first Ironman branded triathlon, and some people raise their hand. And then like, raise your hand if this is your first 70.3 distance, and some people raise their hand. And then they said, and I always have to ask because there's always a few crazies in the crowd, raise your hand if this is your very first triathlon ever. And I raised my hand. And I felt so small in that moment because I really, really felt in over my head. Everyone there looked super elite. They had the like pointy helmets and the fancy bikes, and they were all very thin and fit looking, you know, like it was just, that day I was a little overwhelmed. We were done with that about 3 or 4 in the afternoon. We went and had dinner and basically went to bed. For dinner, we went to a burger place and I had a bunless burger. It was super delicious. And then we checked into the hotel and went to bed super early. I mean, I knew I had to get up at like 4:30 the next day. So we went to bed at like 8 p.m. And surprisingly, I was able to sleep. I got a full like 7.5 hours of sleep according to my Fitbit. I think on some level I knew that I had to, and so I did. I had laid everything out. I was well prepared, and I was able to sleep. So then when I woke up in the morning, it was like boom, 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 just like grab all the things. And I felt like I was taking a lot of things with me. I had like my canvas tote like full of stuff, tons of snacks, because like I said earlier, in my training, I've kind of been eating intuitively, and sometimes I'm hungry and sometimes I'm not. So I packed a ton of snacks, thinking I might open a can of sardines mid-race. I don't know. If I wanted to, I would have had that option. In the morning, I also had a coffee with a burn butter, which is MCT oil and avocado oil, and it's like chocolate flavored and it's so good. And I added MCT oil powder to that as well. So that was my morning nutrition. I also had a Stoka bar with Noosh almond butter, which also has added MCT. So you will hear me mention MCT oil powder or oil a lot. Basically, it's just an added fat source, which, you know, I'm fat adapted, so I use fat for fuel, but MCT in particular is quickly metabolized, so it gives you like a quick burst of energy, not like a quick burst of energy, but your body digests it more quickly. So so that's all I had in the morning was the coffee, the Stoka bar, and the almond butter, all with MCTs. And so then we were literally driving 1 mile to get to the race, and the traffic was stopped. It took us about an hour to get that 1 mile. So I didn't arrive until about 6 o'clock, and they were closing transition at 6:30. Like, I only had half an hour to set up my things. Fortunately, it didn't take that long. Like, once we finally pulled in, so we're like stuck in traffic, just sitting in the car. I like start putting on my little temporary tattoos and stuff. My husband's like with a paper towel. So then we like arrive, they drop me off, they go park, I go set up my transition stuff, and I just kind of like line everything up neatly. But I knew in my mind that I wasn't going to like race through the transitions. Some people really like run and they have this like flow. I mean, in a race that's like 8 hours long, potentially I finished in 6:55, but you know, like in a thing that's many, many hours long, I feel like saving 1 or 2 minutes isn't a big deal for me because I'm not like competing for a world championship spot like some people were, you know, like I was in the just for fun crowd. I just wanted to finish. So I knew I wasn't going to like rush through transitions. I was going to like take my time and set everything up properly. So I set up my bag, I like folded everything up nice, and then it just kind of waited for a while. And like there was so much energy in the crowd and the music is pumping, but it was still dark and it was cold, but it had not yet started raining. So then I dropped off my morning clothes, put my cap on, and they had asked us to like self-seed ourselves based on our swim times. And I had been training a swim time of 36 to 38 minutes, but my coach and other triathlete friends had told me to always go in the group that was faster than my group so that I wouldn't get like stuck in the crowd. So I went in the group that was 25 to 35 minutes. So only about 1 minute off from what I thought I was going to do roughly. But I thought they were going to let like 5 people go and wait. 5 people go and wait. That's not how it was. They just like started and everybody just started like going in. And honestly, you guys, I love swimming. It was like just there and back. That first like quarter, I hated it. I was like, why did I do this? I wish I hadn't told anybody. I wish all these people weren't tracking me. Like, I hate this. It was awful because I couldn't see. And I knew that mentally, logically, I knew that when you're swimming in open water, there's not a bottom of the pool to look at. It's not clear. There's no line. A lot of people say that what's most nerve-wracking about open water swim is having all these people around, and that really didn't bother me. But what is terrifying, really terrifying, is you effectively like have your eyes closed. Think about just like swimming in the ocean with your eyes closed for 45 minutes. It's really unnerving. So in that first like quarter, I was like trying to sight. I couldn't see, like I didn't know where it was. And surprisingly, my husband caught this on film. I went the wrong way. I went off course. I swam off course, and a lifeguard on like a kayak had to stop me. And I thought I had to like go back, but he let me go forward. But I was just that lost. It was awful. And so then I was like, okay, girl, you gotta calm down, because I was panicked. I wanted to quit so bad. So after the guy put me on course, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do a little bit of breaststroke. When I used to compete in swimming, I was a breaststroker. I'm comfortable with that. I mean, I'm comfortable with everything in the pool. This is just a different environment. But I was like, I'm just going to breaststroke a little so I can see where I'm going. And I'm just going to put my head down and swim. And if I can't see, that's okay. I'm just going to swim. And fortunately, in my training, I had counted. It takes me 12 strokes to cross the pool. So I just started counting. I would count to 12, then pop up and look. Count to 12, pop up and look. And then I started doing 24 and pop up and look until I finally got comfortable. The thing about having so many people around though, and because you really can't see, you're swimming and suddenly you're like in someone's armpit and you're like, how did that happen? I didn't even see that person. And then you're swimming some more and you're like between their feet. And it's very unnerving to suddenly be so close to somebody without having seen them approach in any sense. But anyway, I just tried to keep going and hopefully not injure anybody. And when I got to the buoy where I had to turn, I just did breaststroke all the way around. Some people have like very fancy techniques for how they turn. I just did breaststroke because I'm a fast swimmer. Like for me, it's fine. And then I just kept going and I started like singing. Do you guys remember Madonna's Little Star? Never forget who you are, little star. Anyway, I just started singing that to myself and I sang it all the way to the end. But then at the end, we had to like round one more buoy and then come out of the water. As we're rounding this buoy, I get elbowed in the face, like super hard, like right in the nose, in the goggles. It like knocked the wind out of me. And I could see the finish. It was right there, but it was like, whew, that was surprising. But I finished, I got out of the water, I ran out. So as I'm exiting the water, I don't have a watch that's waterproof. I don't know my time, but I get to the transition area and I just see that like all the bikes are still there. So I was like, oh gosh, I must be doing okay. And then there's actually a moment that my husband captured on film where I put my Fitbit back on and I just glance at it and I see 7:41. And the race had started at 7. And I was done with transition. And I was like, oh my God, I must have gone really fast. Later, it turns out they started at like 6:45. But my swim time was 39 minutes, only 1 minute slower than what I had trained in the pool, despite all of that. So I was, in that moment, there were a couple like key moments. That was one moment where I was like, oh my God, I guess I'm doing okay. So then I get on the bike and like the transition area is really, really big. You actually had to bike like a mile and a half before getting out of transition. And there's like a line where you can officially like mount the bike. So I crossed the line and, you know, I've become very comfortable with clipping in and out of my bike over the last 16 weeks. Like this has not been an issue for me at all. So I clip one foot in and you kind of like start to pedal so that you can clip the second foot in. So I clip one foot in, I start to pedal and the woman in front of me stopped short and I just fell over. I fell, like into the crowd, into the fence. The woman, like I fell into a person, like a spectator. She was like, oh my God, are you okay? I was like, yep, better now than later. And I just got up. But at this point, I already had like, I could feel like the scrape on my leg. Later, I had like a knot on one leg and like a scrape on the other side, but it really wasn't too bad. So then I get back on the bike and I cannot clip in and I cannot clip in and I try and there's this like excruciating 30-second video that my husband has of me just like trying and failing at clipping in. I had not failed at clipping in since like the day I learned how, 4 months ago. I don't know. And then just like out of the crowd, I hear my mom shout, tranquila, like calm down. And just like, In that moment, I heard her voice and I was like, okay, deep breath, calm down. And again, in the grand scheme of things, it's 30 seconds in a 7-hour race, no big deal, you know, but it's just like, oh my God. And in the video, you just see like so many people started during that time that I was like stuck trying to get on the bike. Anyway. The whole bike, it was like 3 loops. So we were going down an interstate, off an exit, loop through a town, back on the interstate, and then doing that whole thing 3 times. And I was kind of afraid that I might get lost, but everything was like very well marked, big signs. Even like the tiniest little potholes in the road were like circled and spray painted. So everything was like super clear. So as I get on the bike, it starts to drizzle, just like a light drizzle. I'm like, that's all right. You guys might recall, I have never trained in the rain. On days when it was raining, I would just train indoors. And many of you had asked me, what happens if it rains on race day? And I was like, no, that's not going to happen. Well, it did. I mean, you look at videos from last year's race and it was like hot and sunny. Anyway, so it started to drizzle. It's not that bad. And I was also a little bit nervous about like, there was this drafting rule that you have to be at least 6 bike lengths away from the person in front of you. No one adhered to that. There's just too many people. You end up not in like clumps, but everybody ends up in like a single file line. And you're sometimes like right behind somebody else. And there's like no space to spread out. But sometimes people like pull ahead and you are spread out. So whatever, I just kind of went with it. And I never saw anybody get like an infraction. So I did see the referees were on motorcycles, like kind of going near us, but I didn't never see anybody get like a ticket or a card or whatever. It's a penalty. So they only had 1 aid station, and it was at the very end of the loop, but because it was a loop, we would end up passing it 3 times. So as I passed it the first time, I was like, I'm feeling great, I'm going to keep going. I finished the first loop, and as I'm starting the second one, it really starts to rain, and I'm like super thirsty. I have 2 water bottles with me, one of them with just Zip Fizz, the other one with a Zip Fizz and MCT oil powder. But I am not very practiced in like drinking while riding. I'm just not comfortable with that. So as I approached the second aid station, I pulled over and drank from my bottle and then kept going. So like I didn't even use the aid station, but it was a good place to stop. But actually, so the aid station was like a whole block, a city block of like volunteers just standing around like handing out water and bananas and stuff. And I pulled off to the right, which was kind of a bad idea because then it was hard to like merge back in because everybody was like passing by so quickly. I ended up stopping the third time I passed a transition station as well, but I pulled off to the left. So that way it was like easier to merge back into traffic. But anyway, you learn as you're going. So anyway, second loop, at the end of the second loop, it starts to pour. It is just like pounding rain and it's like stinging your face and it feels like hail. It's just like raining really hard. But I was in the zone. I felt so good. After I stopped for that first drink, I felt like powered up, you know, like when Mario gets the little star and you're like, do, 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 do. Like I wasn't feeling bad before, but I just felt like super energized. And later when I looked at my times, again, everyone has computers on their bikes. I did not. So I didn't know my time and I'm not good enough to like look at my wrist while I'm biking. So, I just keep going and I felt there was a while where I was just like in the zone, like my legs were just pumping, but it was like euphoric, you know, this almost like out of body experience where I'm just like flying past people. And like I said, because sometimes you would end up with like a long line of people, either you have to stay in the position you're in or power past everybody. And there were multiple times where I was like, yeah, I'm feeling it. And I would just like power past like 12 cyclists. And it just felt so good. It was so much fun. There were a couple turns that were a little bit sharp, difficult to maneuver, so I was like slowing way down, and I later read that there were several accidents there. I saw so many people pulled over changing flat tires, and actually the night before I had asked my husband, I had asked him, do you think I'll finish? Realistically, he's a very logical person, and he said, physically, yes, you can do it. The only thing that could go wrong is some kind of mechanical failure, because you're not very well equipped to handle that, or if you have an emotional breakdown. And I was like, okay. So while I'm cycling, I'm just like, please don't let me have some kind of mechanical failure. Like I've practiced changing a flat tire once, and I must have passed maybe like 12 people changing flats, really. I only saw one accident. At the end of the third loop, there was a woman on the side of the road, like splayed out, super bloody. It was bad. But there was an ambulance like on their way, so they were alerted. But I later read that there were several accidents, many broken bones. It was raining and it was slick, and apparently when it rains, there's more, obviously, debris on the road, and people were getting flats who were experienced, like getting a flat is not because you don't know what you're doing. Like I just got lucky, really. I'm so thankful because some of the people I was seeing changing their flats were like super elite people, it wasn't because they were newbies. So anyway, as I'm like finishing the third loop, I'm like, oh my God, I didn't have a mechanical failure. Like I might actually finish this race. Like I didn't fully believe it, but as I was finishing the third loop, I was like, I might actually finish because this was the thing that could have gone wrong. So anyway, I finish the bike, I get back into transition, then I check my watch, and I did the bike in like 3 hours and 10 minutes. I was hoping for under 4 hours, you guys. I beat my like hoping time by 50 minutes. I was flying on the bike. Later I saw there were a big chunk where I was going like 18 miles an hour, where I was hoping, in training I was doing like 15 to 18, but I was like maintaining 18 for 2 of the 3 laps. And then if you look at my times, in my third lap, I went down to like 16 miles an hour just because it was raining so hard. But, again, I'm in the just for fun crowd, I was just having such a good time. Like there were so many spectators, like the bike was so much fun for me. And so then you rack your bike, and at this point, it was pouring raining, and I had left, like, a t-shirt out. I wanted to put on a t-shirt because with my loose skin from weight loss, sometimes I get some, like, chafing where my arm hits my sports bra if I'm not wearing a t-shirt, so, like, with sleeves. So I wanted to put a t-shirt on. Also, sorry for the TMI, but I was on my period. My period was supposed to start Tuesday. It didn't start until Friday, and race was Sunday. So we were like at the height of the period situation. So I also put on shorts just in case. Nothing happened, but I put on more clothing than most people do for the run. So I put on a t-shirt, I put on my baseball cap, I put on the shorts, all of which were sopping wet. Because I had laid them out in transition. Some wiser people had put their things in like a waterproof bag or like some kind of, plastic or whatever bag. I did not. So all of my things were soaking wet. There was like puddles in my shoes. And I had a fresh pair of socks in my bag, but they were also wet. So I'm like, I'm not even going to change my socks. So I put my sneakers on, racked my bag, put on my soaking wet t-shirt, my shorts, my hat. I like grabbed all my things. But what I didn't grab was a nut butter packet, and I probably should have. I don't know. At that point, I was like, I'm a little hungry, but I'll be fine. And then I set out on the run. So it was about 1.5 miles before reaching the boardwalk. And in that first 1.5 miles, it was tough. My legs felt like lead, just heavy. I wasn't. In terms of running, you guys know I'm not very good at running, but sometimes I'm feeling it and it's not that bad, and sometimes it's like the worst thing ever. For that first 1.5 miles, it was tough. But then I got to the boardwalk, and because it's just like a long strip, the way it is you go this way and then back to the finish. So in this first bit, you're seeing all the people who are ahead of you, but then in this bit, you're seeing all the people who are behind you, and that's pretty cool. And in this bit, you're seeing all the people who are finishing. And then in the last bit, you're seeing all the people who are behind you. And that was really, really encouraging to me as well. Because my run time was super slow, but I finished the run in 2 hours and 46 minutes. And I was hoping for under 3 hours. So that was pretty good. After like mile 2, really, I just started seeing all these people who were like super fit passing me, which means I did better than them in the swim and the bike, and that was just like so encouraging to me. Tons of people were passing me on the run because I'm a slow runner, but that's okay. I didn't, I was just going, and so from mile like 2 to 8, I was in the zone. I was just going, I was jogging. My jog is like not good form. I realized that later because I realized I'm very like vertical up and down. I'm not like forward very much. My run form's not very good, but that's okay. I was just going, and I felt so good, and it was pouring rain, and all these spectators were cheering, and because your bib has your name on it, people were like shouting my name as I went past, and it was just like, and then, no music allowed, no headphones, no phones, no speakers, no anything, so you just kind of start to think to yourself, I was singing for a while, and then, you see people's names, and you see the shirts that they're wearing, and you see their ages, because you had to have like your age on your calf, and I was just so inspired by everybody else running. I started like thinking about their stories, how hard they've trained, how far they've come. Every time I saw somebody who appeared to have more than like 2% body fat, I was like, yeah, those are my people. Like a chubby girl went by and I was like, yes, girl, like you have worked so hard for this. I don't know. I was just like so inspired. I really started thinking about every single person I passed, and and everybody was encouraging each other. And as people passed me, I was like, "You're doing great." Like I was just, the run was fun almost. And because it was on the boardwalk, there's like a lot of stuff to look at and everything. And towards the end, you'd pass the finish line and like have to come back to it. So around mile 8, I was like over it. So I walked for a while. And if you look at my times, it's clear that I walked from like mile 8 to mile 10. I mean, I jogged a little bit, but not much. And then at mile 10, I was like, there's only 3 miles to go of a 70-mile race. Like, I'm almost there. Come on, girl, let's go. And at that point, I was checking my Fitbit and my time, and I knew I was close. I wanted to finish under 7 hours, and I finished 6:55. So in those last 3 miles, I gave it everything I had. And it's like you get to the finish line, and it's this like long red carpet. And not until I got on the red carpet was I like, oh my God, I might actually finish. Like, I might actually do this. It's crazy. And then as you approach, they like call your names over the loudspeaker. You are an Ironman. And I just like, it was just such an exciting moment. It was really, really cool to cross the finish line, and like the photographers with the cameras and stuff. And my husband and my mom were like right there, poor things, like sopping wet. I mean, they had an umbrella. My mom was wearing a rain jacket, but like they were both super wet and cold. And yeah, it was incredible. And I think if the weather had been better, we would have stayed to watch more people, but it was so cold. It was so cold. They were giving out those like metal blanket things, those like foil blankets for everybody because it was freezing. And they had a food truck that was giving out cheeseburgers and like pretzels. And then they had a tent with toppings for the burgers. So I skipped the long line for the cheeseburger and just went to the toppings, and I got myself a plate of bacon, and I was not hungry. So it's interesting. There's this like closed Facebook group for the participants of the race, and I've gone through and read a lot of people's comments and their race reports, and people are saying they like were very diligent about consuming 500 to 600 calories every hour of the race. And like I noticed that like nutrition and gels and sugar packs are so important to people who are running on carbs. But when you're fat adapted, you don't need any of that. And it's so liberating. I was fine. I wasn't hungry in the morning, but I had that Soca bar anyway, and the coffee and the MCT. During the bike, I did drink my MCT and my Zip Fizz. And then that's it. I wasn't hungry. After the race, I ate the bacon just because it was there and it looked good, but I wasn't hungry. I felt so good, you guys. Like physically could not have felt better. So, yeah, it was just, it was an incredible day. So at that point we went and we were changing hotels. So we waited for a bus to take us back to the original transition field. I like gathered all my soaking wet things, stuffed them in the car. Then we went to the other hotel to check in, and we're like 3 little like puddles standing in line to check in at the hotel. It was so cold. But then, we checked in, and I got first dibs on the shower, took a warm shower. And then we went to dinner. We were staying at the Hard Rock in Atlantic City. We went to the buffet, and I was not hungry, like zero. But I decided to eat anyway because I figured the next day the hunger would like kick in. So I had some like prime rib and some shrimp, and that was it. Slept like a baby. Yeah, it was just an incredible weekend. So that evening and the next day, I was a little bit sore in the quads. But that was it. My knees were fine. My feet were fine. Everything was totally fine. I was not tired. I did not feel like I needed any kind of painkillers and stuff. I felt fine. And I really think the reason my quads were sore was because I didn't stretch afterwards. Normally after a training session, I was very diligent about stretching. But here at the end of the race, there's like so much commotion and so much excitement. I didn't stretch. Probably more experienced people would know to do that. But I didn't. We just got like swept up and caught up in everything. And so I think if I had stretched properly immediately upon finishing the race, it wouldn't have been so bad. But it really wasn't even that bad. I was just a little sore the next day, and then everything was back to normal. It's incredible how like such a whirlwind weekend can happen so quickly. And at this point, it's been a week, and this week has flown by. I have not done any exercise this week. I went to one yoga class. This morning I went to a step aerobics class, and tonight I'm going to a yoga class, but I'm kind of taking it easy for now. And yeah, I feel so good. What I realize now, having done this race, is that it's the kind of thing that is doable. You know what I mean? Like it feels much less impossible. And that's really powerful. Having done it, now I kind of feel like I can do anything. I mean, I felt like I could have done another one the next day, What the hard part is the training, because that is 4 months out of the year, so a third of the year, where all of my free time was spent training. So people have asked me if I'm going to do another one, and I would say maybe someday, but not right away, because really for a third of the year, I turned down all social obligations. I didn't really do anything. I felt like I was not a wife, like I felt like I just wasn't present in my life the way I want to be. All of my time was consumed by training. And that with a like flexible job that allowed me to do some of my training midday. So, it was an incredible experience. I don't know that I'll do another one right away just because it's such a big time commitment, but like I said, now I feel like it's the kind of thing that can be done. And I continue to say, if you keep training, things eventually become easier. So this isn't the sort of thing I can say, oh yeah, you can just go out and do it, no problem. Like anything you set your mind to, you can do. No. But if you train and train and train and train, eventually things get easier and then you can do whatever you want. So on that note, I will again say thank you so much for watching and following and encouraging me. You guys have meant the world, and I really appreciate all of your love and support. Talk to you later. Bye.